Welcome to the DOGE Diaries, diving deep into government efficiency.
Hey everyone, glad to be back.
Hi all, ready to get into it?
Absolutely, there's a lot happening. Did you guys see the news about all these states hopping on the DOGE train? It's not just a federal thing anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, isn't it? You've got New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Oklahoma. Seems like a whole movement is brewing. They're all calling it DOGE-inspired.
It's pretty interesting. It's like everyone is suddenly trying to cut costs. I wonder if it's actually going to make a difference at the state level, or if it's just political theater.
That's what I was thinking. They're talking about all these commissions and committees, like New Hampshire's KG in Wisconsin's GOTE. It's a lot of acronyms, but are they actually going to dig into the issues, or just slash budgets indiscriminately? It's like, if the goal is really to improve things, cutting willy-nilly isn't a sustainable solution. It needs to be more thoughtful.
Right, exactly. I mean, I'm all for efficiency, obviously, but just hacking away at spending without understanding the underlying structures or why those costs exist, it's a recipe for disaster. It's like cognitive restructuring. You can't just delete the negative thought. You need to understand it, then change it, right?
Totally. And it's not like states are the same as the federal government. They can't just print money to solve things. I mean, most states have that balanced budget thing, right? So you can't just slash without understanding the repercussions, especially if you're taking away public services. It's like you can't cut your sleep short to get more work done. It usually backfires later.
Yes, exactly. And it's like what I've been learning about mindful consumption. You can't just cut out all food. You need to understand the hunger cues and what your body needs, and then choose mindfully. Just cutting spending across the board is like ignoring the body's needs. They are all interlinked.
I see that. The idea of understanding the why before acting is key. It's like with cognitive distortions. If you're always catastrophizing, just telling yourself to stop it isn't effective. You need to challenge the underlying belief. So if these states are just cutting for the sake of it without really looking at the systems, they are essentially trying to silence a symptom rather than understanding the disease.
That makes sense. And it makes me think of when I try to push myself too hard with exercise. If I don't understand my limits and my body's response, I'll just end up injured or exhausted. You can't just keep cutting the budget if the underlying programs are valuable. There has to be some sort of analysis into what works and what doesn't, and then go from there. I mean, I know my body needs a certain amount of movement for good sleep, and if I push too hard, I will get insomnia.
Exactly, it's about balance. It's like when I've been practicing mindful eating. I found that when I really pay attention to my body's signals, I eat what it needs, not just what I want. If these states focused on understanding what their actual goals are and the people's needs, rather than just cutting for the sake of cutting, it could actually make a meaningful change. And I wonder if the people in these states are even being asked about what they need.
That's the thing, isn't it? Are they actually engaging with the people they serve, or are they just mimicking this federal initiative because it's popular? I saw that one representative called DOGE cool again. I mean, what does that even mean? It's almost like they're using it as a marketing strategy, which, from a cognitive perspective, is quite interesting actually.
Yeah, it's definitely something else, and that makes me a little nervous. I guess it's a way to garner public support, but is it actually useful? It sounds a lot like my exercise classes sometimes. They'll promote a new intense workout that is supposed to get you results, but if it's not the right fit for my body, it does not work well and could cause an injury. I mean, if you're just trying to get the cool factor of something without the substance behind it, it seems pointless and even a little bit scary.
That's a great point. It's like when you see a new fad diet. Everyone is suddenly doing it, but they are not paying attention to their unique needs. It's just another way of doing things without mindfulness and without connection. And the article said that they are not even sure what they're actually going to be targeting when it comes to cuts. It seems kind of reckless to be cutting without actually understanding what the outcome might be.
It's all about perception, really. If you present something as cool or efficient, people tend to get on board without thinking critically. It reminds me of cognitive biases. We're so susceptible to framing and authority, and it makes us take shortcuts instead of really considering the potential consequences of such significant budget changes. I mean, too, has just taking an idea from someone else worked well in reality?
Right? It's the halo effect or something. Trump and Musk are these big figures, so everything they touch is considered to be awesome. But I am concerned. It's like those celebrity fitness plans. They might work for the celebrity, but what if I have an injury or need something different? It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. It makes me wonder if the people running these state DA committees have actual practical experience in budgeting, or if they're just copying some ideas they found online, like a TikTok challenge.
Yeah, I feel that. It's like with meditation, you can't just pick a random technique and expect it to work for you. You have to understand your own mind and your specific needs. And what even constitutes a good metric for success here? They're talking about cutting expenses, but there needs to be some sort of measurable value associated with it, you know? What are they trying to achieve in these communities?
Absolutely. Without clear metrics, it's just vague rhetoric. It's like saying, I want to feel happier, but not defining what happy actually looks like for you. You know, in CBT, we always need to define the problem before we try to solve it. Otherwise, you're just randomly trying to implement ideas without a clear path forward. It's like with AI training, we know if the data is messy, the outcome will be messy too.
And it's the same with fitness. I always set out a clear goal, like a marathon or being able to lift a certain weight. Otherwise, you are just running in circles. If these states don't have goals, it's just cutting without purpose. Like, are they measuring things like improved public services, or are they measuring things like increased wait times, lower quality services? If they're just looking at the bottom line, then they might just be putting a band-aid on a much bigger problem that's festering.
Yeah, and it's so crucial to consider the actual impacts on people's lives. I mean, cutting government spending can have real consequences for vulnerable populations that rely on those services. When I'm thinking about making changes to my eating habits, I need to check in with how I am feeling physically and emotionally to make sure I'm getting my needs met. These states really need to think through the impact their changes are going to have on their communities. And I wonder if that's even part of the plan.
That's the ethical consideration that seems to be missing. It's like, are these people thinking about the impact on the people? It seems like a cognitive bias towards focusing on the monetary aspect without looking at the human factor. It's the same way we sometimes devalue emotional responses when we try to think our way out of problems. We might say, I shouldn't be sad instead of acknowledging why we are.
It also worries me that these committees are all dominated by Republicans. The article mentions that Democrats are feeling excluded and in the dark in some of these states. When you're trying to implement a new fitness routine, you need feedback, right? You need someone to say, hey, maybe that's not the best way to do that exercise to avoid an injury. So if they're just pushing their own agenda, it seems like it's just going to create deeper divisions instead of an actual solution.
Yes, and it's like in any community, you need diverse perspectives to make it thrive. When I meditate with a group, I find that the varied experiences really enrich my own practice. If these states shut out the democratic voices, it's like they're intentionally limiting the potential of these new programs, and that doesn't feel very efficient to me.
I agree that lack of diversity in the planning stage can be a huge problem. It's like in AI development. If your training data only reflects one demographic, your algorithm will be biased. You need all kinds of viewpoints to account for the complexities of these programs and how they affect different people. When the brain starts to only value information it already knows, it gets rigid.
And it feels like a recipe for disaster, like if you try to learn to swim only by reading books and not actually getting into the water. If these new initiatives are just based on theoretical ideas without any input from people on the ground that are living it, it will crash and burn. And the taxpayers will be the ones to pay the price, you know?
Yeah, and it seems like they are rushing into it too. One article said that some of these states don't even have concrete targets for spending cuts. It's like when I started meditating and just went straight for the longest and most complicated meditations. I just ended up feeling overwhelmed and frustrated. They need to understand the basics and have clear milestones. This should be a marathon, not a sprint.
I couldn't agree more. This idea of rushing headlong reminds me of the cognitive bias of present biases, where we prioritize immediate gratification over long-term planning. Instead of a calm, rational assessment, they're just rushing to copy a movement to appease voters without even a clear strategy. It's like when an algorithm starts to overfit. It performs well on the training data, but poorly when it faces the real world. They should be taking things slowly and analyzing.
And it's so unsustainable. It's like when I try to do a super intense workout every single day, I'll burn out and injure myself. It's better to focus on consistency and steady progress, with time for recovery. These states need to be building systems that can actually last, you know? A balanced workout regimen is best, a balance between cardio, weights, and rest. And if they are going to make a change this big, then I am worried for their citizens.
Yeah, they need to think long-term and big picture, just like I've been trying to with my health. It's about developing sustainable habits. And the other aspect that seems kind of concerning is the whole tech thing. They're talking about modernizing government software. But one article was saying it's just a rebrand of an existing digital service. Is this just a way to cut costs disguised as technological advancement?
That's what struck me too. It seems like they're trying to use technology as a scapegoat for budget cuts. I mean, yes, updating IT systems is important, but it's not a magic bullet. It's like saying that all our problems stem from not having the correct software, which is such a cognitive distortion. It's the classic appeal to technology where we overestimate what tech can achieve and we don't look at the root cause. Software is a tool, not a complete solution.
And it's like they're saying the whole problem is bad software instead of the actual spending. It reminds me of when I get fixated on having all the right gear for my workouts. It's nice to have, but it doesn't replace actual effort or consistency. I think we should be asking hard questions, like, is there a real transparency to this whole thing? Or are they just trying to do it to make it look like they are addressing the problem?
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to make these huge claims about efficiency, where's the data backing this up? If they are going to make that claim, then they need to be able to provide some sort of tangible proof that their plans are working. It's not just about changing processes, but fundamentally changing how they approach these issues. Like when I do my guided meditation, I can feel my stress levels lowering, and I can measure the impact. These states should be able to do something similar.
Right, the metrics are crucial, and also the data transparency. It feels like they are operating from a place of bias if they are not willing to be transparent. In cognitive behavioral therapy, it's all about gathering evidence to support or refute a thought pattern. Without data, we're just operating on assumptions, and these guys seem to have a big assumption that everything can be made better by technology, and that's not realistic. If the underlying thought process is fundamentally flawed, then the action will not provide the results you are looking for.
And transparency is everything. Like, if my fitness tracker is not accurately giving me information, how do I make proper choices? There has to be accountability and some type of measurement and open communication. It is like when they promote a new miracle product on a late-night commercial, they promise it will solve all your problems without any evidence. They need to put all the information on the table and let us decide for ourselves.
Totally. And it seems like they are re-interviewing existing staff at the federal level under this new DOGE service, which feels really unsettling. The article made it sound like they are being assessed for their loyalty, which sounds more like control, not efficiency. It makes me want to do some mindful breathing and center myself. I wonder if those staffers are getting any self-care.
That re-interviewing thing is a huge red flag. It feels like a classic case of us versus them. It's like they're trying to weed out anyone who doesn't agree with their vision, which is so counterproductive to innovation. In CBT, we learn to challenge our black and white thinking, but it appears that they are actively creating more division rather than trying to unite. It is just another cognitive distortion at play.
Yeah, it's not really about efficiency at that point, is it? It's more about control. It's like if you try to force someone into a fitness routine they hate, it's never going to work out for them. They have to want to be there. If you try to weed out certain people, you will end up with a weaker team. And that just hurts everyone. All these new plans, they are missing key components for them to be successful.
It makes me wonder if there is something that we as citizens can do to make these new programs more efficient. Maybe we can contact our local representatives and demand more transparency, and provide them the data that would be valuable. Maybe we should hold them accountable to real metrics and have more community involvement. We should be mindful that the community is being served.
I think that's absolutely essential. It is also important for us to look at our own biases and the way we process information before we make a conclusion about how to move forward. It really does seem like a complex issue that needs a lot of different lenses to understand. But we all have the capacity to change things if we are willing to actively do the work and be part of the process.
I agree. It sounds like it. I mean, what they are doing, it has real consequences. It's like trying to promote a healthier lifestyle. You need the right tools, the right data, and the right support. And everyone should want the same goal. If we don't do anything, we might just end up with a bunch of half-baked ideas that don't really help anyone. And it's a good reminder that everyone should be looking at their own habits and see how they can be better.
Well, this was certainly a lot to unpack, and I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. I am really curious about how it all plays out. Thanks for diving deep with me.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Thanks, everyone.
Totally, same here. Until next time.